Hello, everyone. Yet once again, it's another day of fresh grace and mercy. This is the Guilt, Grace, Gratitude podcast, where we bridge the gap to Reformed Christian theology for your listening pleasure. Today's book club episode is brought to us by Baker Books. Baker, the publisher of this book that we're going to be talking today about with the author, Marisol Rodriguez. The book is called Beyond Her Yes, Reimagining Pro-Life Ministry to Empower Women and Support Families in Overcoming Poverty. It's a very excellent book. We're passionate about this cause and this ministry and what it's all about and what she's doing. This is such a great book. If you guys go to our show notes and click the Baker link, it'll take you right to this book. A brief summary about this book just on the front end, so you guys warm you guys up to what we're going to be talking about. This book is about pro-life advocate and Urban Mentoring Center director calls the church to expand in its perspective beyond its initial choice of whether to continue an unplanned pregnancy and to become part of a life-transforming ministry that empowers women to overcome generational poverty and secure a better future for their families. So if you also go to our show notes, there's information just about our show in general. These are book club episodes. If you go to our YouTube page, you can see the playlists of all our book club episodes. We also have playlists of our seasonal episodes. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out also on our podcast catcher apps. Subscribe to us there as well to just listen to these in audio only format. You can also engage with us on social media. We are on Twitter, X, Instagram, and then you can email us, of course, at guiltgracepod@gmail.com if you wanted to do it that way as well. So, yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation. This was a fantastic book. We're going to jump into this conversation. I'll let Peter further introduce our guest and author today of this book, Marisol Rodriguez.
Yeah, we have Marisol Rodriguez, who's the co-founder of Renew Life Center in New Jersey, which seeks to pick up where pregnancy resource centers leave off in order to support women and help them overcome generational poverty. She's born to a single mother, which is exactly what my wife was born to as well, and raised in generational poverty. Marisol has a deep experiential understanding of the woman she serves. She's worked in pregnancy resource ministries for over 20 years, first as volunteer, and then as an urban life center director. She's the parent of 4 adult children and lives with her husband in New Jersey. It's a pleasure having you on our show, Mrs. Rodriguez.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Of course. Yeah. So I want to talk about on the front end real quick. So if you guys go on Renew Life Center's website, it's renewlifecenternj.org. There's a little donate link on the bottom right. I'm going to remind you guys again at the end of this episode, because like Nick said, we don't just want to talk about it, we want to do something about it. So it's donate to this or donate, and we'll talk about this throughout the episode, pregnancy crisis centers as well. But Marisol, tell us a little bit more about yourself beyond the Baker academic profile of Marisol.
Well, that profile is important, and I'll add to it as well. As you mentioned in the profile, I was born to a single mother in generational poverty, where there was no education before her children, which meant me and my siblings, right? So completely uneducated background, single mother, multiple children, different last names, some of them. And you know what? Our lives were transformed by the church. And it's so funny to me in hindsight, when I was writing this book, as I was writing this book, I'm remembering my childhood and my life, and I'm realizing that I'm really writing about what happened to me and what happened to my mom, right? So as a single mom, she walked into a church with a bunch of kids, and they embraced her and supported her and her children. And in turn, they transformed our lives.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's hugely important for what the church is there. Obviously, we preach the gospel, but it's like the support of what they do for these.
Sometimes we can look at single moms and their kids, and I think unfortunately the church can like, well, what went wrong with you? And like, how'd you find this place? But it's, man alive, it's if we can invite them as much family as anybody else in the church, it changes things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes at, I know that you're going to talk about this, like who your target audience was with this book, and the pro-life perspective and people that are already pro-life, but also I think it answers a huge objection from the pro-choice crowd that's saying,
Yeah.
hey, you Christians,
You're
you
beginning
believe
of life people, but not end of life people or middle of
you're
life people.
Yeah.
you're all about saving the baby in the womb, but what happens to after
Yeah.
the baby's born in the world?
Which is
So
unfortunately true for a lot of Christians who are pro-life. We're pro-life at conception, and then we kind of forget about the baby after that.
so
Yeah,
this
well-
book is really about a lot of that.
It is about a lot of that, but you know, even that criticism isn't well founded, because I always say
Right.
no one's criticizing the Susan G. Komen Foundation for only addressing breast cancer, right? That's all they do. They don't address any other cancer. They're not pounding them and
Yeah.
say, well, you should be addressing every other cancer too. But yet they expect the pro-life group to solve all the problems in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
And there's plenty of them. But so it's an unfounded argument, but whether it's founded or not, we as Christians, our heart, and I think our mandate, from God is to serve the least of these, is to help them develop a life that is more abundant in Christ first and foremost, and just improve people's circumstances. I think we're called to that.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah. So starting off into this conversation in the book, you talk a lot about a metaphorical pro-life baton race for the services supporting someone thriving for a lifetime for an abundance, and I underline abundance, that's a very important word, of care versus, like we were saying, just only saving the baby in the womb and stopping there. So can you describe in a baton race kind of linear understanding the organizations that serve in the steps from start to finish that you lay out beautifully throughout the book? It starts off, with the pregnancy centers, and then goes to Renew, which you founded, and then Lighthouse, your partner, and then the church.
Well, yes, that's the way it should go. We hope it goes. So, we've all seen those baton races, right? Where you have that first person out there, right? They start off strong and they pass on. To me, that first person in that first leg of the race is what we call sidewalk advocates. They're the people that are standing outside the abortion clinic, trying to approach women and couples and say, hey, would you give me a moment of your time? Let's talk about this decision you're about to make. It's irreversible. I think it deserves 2 minutes of contemplation before you go in there. Right. So that's your sidewalk advocate. If that woman is lucky enough to stop and listen, she will most likely go with this sidewalk advocate either to a mobile ultrasound unit that may be nearby, like to Save the Storks, or they may be driven to a pregnancy resource center. So that's 2. So now the sidewalk advocate takes this woman, hands her over to the pregnancy resource center. In the perfect world, this sidewalk advocate, who's an exceptional person, not everybody can do that. These are exceptional people. They are a breed of their own. I have the highest respect for them. They should drop her off there and now head back to the sidewalk where they do what most people can't do. Go back and save another life. The pregnancy center receives the woman, does ultrasound, pregnancy test ultrasound, and refers her for prenatal care. They offer parenting classes, material support when the baby's born. Now they do this for up to the baby's first year, typically speaking. I'm sure every pregnancy center is slightly different, up to the baby's first year. And then, but see, here's the thing, here's the gap. There's no one after that to catch, there's no hand after that catching that next baton, right? Where does the girl go after that year is up? I will tell you that many pregnancy centers will hand her a list of local churches. That's not very effective. Let's be honest.
There's a bunch of options. What do you do from there?
Yeah, like there's 12 churches, nobody in there, nobody there. You're
That's
a single
scary.
mother.
Yeah.
It's scary. You're already feeling ashamed of your life circumstance, right? So you're going to walk in, group of unknown people. You don't know how you're going to be received. So that's not usually working. But so in Paterson, New Jersey, where I am, we have the sidewalk advocates that bring the girls to our partner Lighthouse. Lighthouse refers her to Renew Life Center. And Renew Life Center now, in partnership with local churches, that's where we get our volunteers from. That's where we get our support. Now, create a relationship with this woman for the long term. Now, when people ask me, well, what does long term mean? What I always say, as long as it takes. That's really it. It's as long as it takes. Personally, I've been mentoring the same woman for 8 years.
That's right. Yep.
You know, but that's because like I think about her at night. She's my girl, you know, she's like another daughter to me. She calls me mom. So, and that doesn't happen all the time, but you get to develop life relationships with people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. So yeah, the baton race right now is very short. It's sad, but it's very short. It's a sidewalk advocate to the pregnancy center. And then in most cases, then what? You know, we developed Renew Life Center for that purpose, to be the next hand that gets the baton, you know, in partnership with the church. So, and yeah, the church is a big part of that. That, you know, church is where we do life. Isn't that what they say nowadays, right? You do life in church, and you got your life group, right? So where's her life group?
Yeah.
You know, so that's what we intend to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So this question I ask, it in no way is meant to denigrate the pro-life camp, but all of us are pro-life here. So it's just it's more like kind of a speck in our eye. We gotta kind of figure things out. But there's a lot of books, a lot of information, kind of apologetics on pro-life, and it's not really what this book is about. Like you said, this assumes the pro-life movement, not makes the case for a pro-life movement. Nature of conception, image of God, and so much more. But this is unlike those books. Not to say that it says no to those books. It just kind of builds upon these books. So related to the next question, what often gets missed in the pro-life movement? So like, of course we should be pro-life as Christians, but what gets missed in the pro-life movement? What are you calling us to in this book?
I think what's getting missed is the long view of the life of this woman. And I think what also, listen, you've heard of the phrase, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you, and well, you know, here's another thing. Let me back that up a little bit.
Go for it.
Most people that are serving in pro-life ministry in any capacity are most likely people that are coming from a middle-class background. You have the free time, the resources, the education, the skill.
That's my background.
To go out there and do something. And you can do that because you are already resourced, right? So when we're coming from that well-resourced background, we have no idea the resources that other people lack, right? And I think what we're missing is seeing that her life is so different than mine, not just because people would like to think, well, she made different decisions, or she made bad decisions. She made different decisions, and maybe bad one, because she had different resources available to her, right? And she comes from a different background, in a different situation. She's operating from survival skills, not thriving skills. So what we're missing is that we're missing what we don't know. We don't know what generational poverty looks like. And when a woman from this kind of background tries to walk into an abortion clinic, and someone interrupts her and says, hey, why are you walking in there? She goes, well, I don't have a job, I don't have money. And someone says, hey, you know, we're here to support you in that. If that's why you're walking in, you don't need to do that. Then very often they'll take you up on that help. So what we're missing is that we're missing what we don't know what those 17 years after that year at the pregnancy center looks like, feels like. We don't know what resources she has available. We don't know what she doesn't have available. And, you know, let me throw some numbers at you. 62% of children from chronic poverty don't get a high school diploma by the age of 20. So that means they're like 3 years later than everybody else. Well, that means also that 38% of them aren't getting a high school diploma. Think about that. 38 teen pregnancies are much higher in poverty and single parent household, right? There's gang involvement that often leads to prison. So when you sit back and think, this young lady was about to get an abortion, now she's not, but she's still going to go home and have this baby and raise him in the exact same environment she's in, with the same lack of resources. What's the outcome going to be for that baby? What's the outcome? I know we care about that.
Yeah.
I know we do. I just don't think we think about it.
No, we don't. Like you said, we can kind of assume that she has the same resources that we do. And why didn't she use those resources? And why is she saying no to this stuff? We're kind of coming to this assuming we have similar backgrounds and similar stuff available to us.
Right. And it's so untrue. It's so untrue. And it's very unfortunate, but I know we care. I just don't think we are aware of what the outcome can possibly be if we don't get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, leading into my question, so something that's really struck out in the book, and you have a lot of stats and like you were just saying, something that struck me too is that um, a lot of these girls from poverty situations that are going to an abortion clinic, it's not that they necessarily want to get an abortion, that they already know that it's murder, really, but
Mhm.
they're in a survival
There's
mode
no other
where
option that they think of.
we like when we're this is leading in my next question for a purpose, because you're going to describe the different types of poverty, but they are in a situation where the back's against the wall, and they're in a crisis situation where it's survival mode. And you're going to talk about like, what does that mean in a poverty setting that we in middle class citizens just don't really understand. But so that really struck me too, because then they're looking at or they're looking for somebody to grab their
Mhm.
hand in the parking
Yeah.
lot, that one person be like, you have options, I will be
Mm.
there to help you. And they're like, thank goodness, I was hoping,
Yeah.
so my next question is, this is a big question. It's really helpful for foundational background. There's two different types of terms. There's situational, and then there's generational poverty. So situational poverty, generational poverty, but generational poverty accounts for most unwanted pregnancies and abortions. Um, Within that, why do Christians in poverty tend to experience it less traumatically? So maybe a definition of what situational poverty is,
Okay.
what generational poverty is, and then also why Christians within poverty, with whether they're situational or generational, why do they tend to deal with this experience less traumatically?
Yeah. Okay. Well, great questions. I love it. I love it. So situational poverty is someone who is put into poverty because of a situation. So it could be a death, you're left widowed. It could be a major illness that drains your bank account and you can't work anymore. So situational poverty means you weren't poor before, but you're thrown into poverty for a while, at least, right? And so, but what we have to remember there is that poverty is different because you come from a background that is resourced. So even though you're in situational poverty now, most likely you still have an education, you still have business contacts, you have networks, professional networks. So you have things that you can now dip into to try to work yourself out of this poverty, which that would be, when people say pull yourself up from your bootstraps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the bootstraps. What you
Mm-hmm.
have are your bootstraps, right?
Mm.
So they have something to grab onto and to build from to work their way out of the situation. Generational poverty is when you come from a background of poverty for 3 generations or more. So that means your parents are from poverty, your grandparents are from poverty, your great grandparents are from poverty. This type of poverty is entrenched, right? And there are no bootstraps. There are no bootstraps. So a lot of what we expect people in poverty to do they don't have it because it comes from living in an environment of where those things are modeled, and they don't have the modeling. So as you're growing up and you see mom and dad go to work, they get dressed, they go to the office, they work from home, you see them thriving and you pick that up. But when all you see is people that are not working, not educated, maybe that's all you know. So you have no idea how to apply for a job or go on Indeed to look for a job or submit an application or how to interview. There's so much that's missing that we take for granted, there's a lot missing that we take for granted. So now, why would there be more abortions in poverty than in not? Well, there's multiple reasons. Number one, if you think about where all your abortion clinics are located, they're located in poverty areas.
Yep.
You
We have
never
a bunch in
find
Santa
one.
Ana because Santa Ana is relatively
Exactly.
impoverished.
Right. So poverty is marketed to, abortion is marketed to people in poverty. So that's one reason. The other reason also is because they have a few other options, at least visible to them, right? They have few other options. And also, listen, this is very important to know. To not have a pregnancy requires more planning than to have a pregnancy, right? So it's very easy to get pregnant. It's not easy not to get pregnant. And the very thing that you need not to get pregnant is resources. But then you could say, hey, they give away free condoms and everything all over the place. What do you mean, right? but then you have to plan. It takes advanced planning, right? And it takes control. And those are things that people in poverty often don't have the ability to do, right? You have to have some type of control over your environment, over your life, and they feel very out of control. That's one thing that's, I come from that background, so I can tell you that it feels like you have very little options and control. So yeah, listen, I worked at a pregnancy center for 10 years, did intake after intake, positive pregnancy test after positive pregnancy test. I would ask the question, did you intend to have a baby? The answer 9 out of 10 times was no. The next question is, were you using birth control? 9 out of 10 times, no. So why? Why? Because it required planning and control and all these other things. So that's part of it. So now I hopefully I answered your question so far, those two. The other question was why Christians in poverty experience it less dramatically. That's because they're not involved in the behaviors that cause the trauma. So I tell people I grew up in Christian poverty, and I was very lucky for that, because my mom happened to get saved when I was just born, maybe somewhere between my birth and my second birthday. My mom became saved and entered a church. When you are living out Christian values, you're not using drugs, you're not drinking alcohol, which are both money wasters and also cause trauma, right? Not only to the person using them, but to the family around them, right? There's no gambling, another addictive behavior that causes trauma and impacts family. And there's no promiscuous behavior, which would prevent teen pregnancies and will prevent, all the other host of things that come from that. And of course, your mother won't let you roam the streets at night, so you're not getting involved in the gangs. So when you are in poverty, I've lived next door to young women, same poverty, but my mom, when she came to know the Lord, we followed Christian values in our home. She wasn't going to have it. She knew what her life was like, and she wanted better for her children. So in our neighborhood with everybody else, we were still in a little bubble. And that bubble was the church, which kept us busy. That's where we went for youth group and Wednesday night meetings and Sunday. That was our social connection. And then on top of that was my mother establishing Christian values in our home. And there's even in my book, I list studies, or actually studies that show that people with a faith background in poverty suffer much less than those in the same, because poverty is not just about economics, right? There's other things that impede that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's even the case, if you can say this, that when you're part of a church, if you're not part of a church, there's just less kind of network around you. There's less safety net around you. There's just less resources available. And if you're part of a church, even if you're just thinking of resources, like there's at least some people there. There's somebody there. There are models at the church that you can follow. There are people that you can follow versus outside the church. I mean, the only models that you have are on the street, your next door neighbors. And if that's all that you've ever known, you don't know to go to another model. Because like, if you're a kid, you assume what you see is what exists in the world.
I was able to see both. I was able to see my home, and I was able to see how my girlfriends, my age, same school, same situation, they were getting pregnant. I wasn't getting pregnant. They were doing drugs. I wasn't doing drugs. They're running the streets at night. I wasn't running the streets at night, and I thank God. I thank God for my mother, and I thank God for that. But one more thing about being a Christian in poverty is mental health issues. People in poverty suffer more mental health issues than others: anxiety, depression, loneliness, and so forth. When you have faith and hope in Christ, whatever crisis you're in, that's a source of strength. That's an anxiety reliever and a loneliness reliever. So I think that because you have that hope in God and you have that resource in God, your mental stability is far better.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming into this next question, I don't want to generalize too much, but you talk about these women and the men and the decision. It tends not to be related so much to the moment of birth, but like you said, what are we going to do after this stuff? We don't know what we're going to do after this. So what are some of the challenges that exist for those who do say yes? So we've talked about some of the opportunities, I guess, available, but what are some of the challenges? I'm thinking you talk about kind of government funding for those who have the kids versus, like just get a job, or like, it's a little bit more complicated than getting a job because you don't get the as much resources from the government. So talk about some of the challenges that exist after they have their baby.
Some of the challenges are the same, just compounded, because now you have another mouth to feed, right? So you still have the same challenges, but now it is worse though. There's another person to take account of, not only in feeding, but also in housing. So if you're in a 2-bedroom apartment and you already have 3 or 4 kids, can you put a 5th one in there? Does that require you now to have to move, to be able to do that? But also would it be adding to your childcare expense? Those are additional. So it's not like it's just another baby. It's another, it could be a childcare expense. It could be, is it interrupting your education? Right? What is it going to do to your work if you are working? What is that going to do to your work? Is there family support available? I know mothers that are very helpful to their daughters, and they're like, listen, I've helped you with 2 kids. The 3rd one, I'm out. It's not always that easy. So, and then also what you were alluding to about government support, it's that government support, as you do better, just a little bit better, it starts to shrink a lot. I've seen women lose like $300-400 worth of food stamp support because she got $1 an hour raise. And you're like, so it's like you take a step forward and 2 step back. There's a lot that they're butting up against that we don't see. We tend to believe that social services are abundant, that Section 8, affordable housing is abundant, and we're making life so easy for these women. That's why
definitely not abundant. Yeah.
Right. That's why they keep popping out babies, because we're making it so easy for them. And listen, are there irresponsible people in poverty? Absolutely.
Sure,
I will tell you, you have those that you are right by describing them that way. My experience in 22 years has been that they are not the majority. They are not the majority. The majority of people want to do better. Every girl walking into that or trying to walk into that clinic had a dream to do better, to be the first in her family to get a high school diploma, or maybe a college education, or have a career. Those dreams are out there, and they're disappearing, and they're being squashed. And this unplanned pregnancy just makes that dream even harder or further away, or maybe makes you think it's not possible anymore. And that's what we want to do. We want them to know, no, hey, it is possible. And there's people here to help you finish school, to help you do that and have your baby, because we care about your baby, but we care about you as well. And that's what we want these women to know.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And obviously we want all these women to keep their babies. That's obvious. We're pro-life, and, they have all these obstacles in front of them. And so we want to be there to help alleviate, remove, assist around these obstacles and whatnot. So when it comes to the church's mission, I think that we've talked about that a little bit more when it comes to, we have talked about that so far when it comes to this topic and helping. So there is a rhetorical question you ask at the end of your book, and particularly chapter 6, which is titled Short-Term Support versus Long-Term Sustainability. So this is a good question to include in the conversation. So you already have the question in the book, so I'll just kind of say it on the air like I'm asking you, and then have you answer it. So this is what you say. You say, how can the church get involved in this daunting but rewarding mission?
It is daunting. I'll admit that. I'm going to tell you how they get involved. But I want to start with saying that, a woman who's considering abortion, her first 2 encounters are very short term. The sidewalk advocate encounter, very short term. Then the pregnancy center encounter, that's longer, but that could be 1.5 years or so, right? But that's still short term in the scheme of things, right? After that service at the pregnancy center ends, she still has 17 years of parenting, right? 17 years of navigating, how to raise this child, and oftentimes alone. So how can the church get involved in that? The church can get involved in that in a couple of different ways. Hey, volunteer more at a pregnancy center, offer to do more at your local pregnancy center. Say, you know what, I just don't want to be a short-term counselor or advocate here. Can we develop some kind of long-term mentoring program? Me and my congregation or my friends would love to partner with girls long-term. The other thing a church could do is look around, see, is there a ministry like Renew Life Center that already exists in the area that is providing that for the pregnancy center, providing the additional support? Get involved there, because ministries like mine are designed to partner with the church. They're designed to give the church a conduit through which that they can support these women. Because a lot of pastors will tell me, Marisol, I want to help. I don't know how. I mean, where do we begin? I don't know how. Well, find a ministry like Renew Life Center and they'll show you how. Another thing a congregation can do, and I would say not just one congregation, I would love, and I'm a dreamer, I would love to see multiple churches come together to do one project. For example, I'm sure within a stone throws away of any pregnancy center, there's at least half a dozen churches.
Sure, yeah.
Can they come together and say, you know what? We're going to develop a ministry like a Renew Life Center that's going to provide education, mentoring, financial literacy, long-term support. Yeah, I mean, one church could say, oh, geez, we got to raise $200,000 to do something like that. Not necessarily, but if you had churches that collaborated together and say, we're going to work as a team for the sake of life, we're going to come together as a team and we're going to create something. I mean, Renew Life Center has a great model of how we support these women, and we're happy to share it, on how to do that. That's what the church can do, and the church, and really it's funny because I'm not really asking the church to do more than what they're actually already doing. It's just point that towards people outside your congregation, right? And not just everybody, just these women who chose life. I just feel we have a moral responsibility when you stop someone and say, hey, don't do that. It's a sin. We don't want you to commit that sin. We want you to, we want to spare the baby and you from that. I think that should carry a long-term support to that. And for the church to say, hey, you know what, we're going to make our church single mom friendly. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, you provide childcare. Every time your church is open, you're providing. You can't have a women's Bible study and expect single moms to come in if you don't have childcare.
Yeah.
Do you have any mechanics at your church? Could they give her an oil change or a tune-up for free? Hey, do you have someone that could tutor her? She's trying to be a nurse's aide or whatever. So it's just do what you do. Just include a group of people that maybe you would have never met otherwise. I tell you, they will enrich your life.
Oh, yeah.
In ways you can never imagine. You're going to learn from them more than you ever think you can imagine. You're going to go closer to God because you're actually being his hands and feet here on earth. Your faith is going to soar. Because you see God operating. Look, nothing shows you how puny you are than serving. People like, oh, I don't know if I'm qualified. What do you mean if you don't know if you're qualified? Do you love the Lord? Yes. Do you love your neighbor? Yes. Show up. Your job is to show up, and God's job is the rest. Yeah. So that's what a church can do. Just think about how can you make your church environment more supportive of these moms, and how can you get outside of your four walls to support a pregnancy center further, or start a parachurch ministry that can provide these support services and collaborate with other churches to do so, because we know that many hands make light work, right? So I think that's a beautiful thing that I dream of to see come about.
I love that. Yeah. And that's actually a beautiful transition to my last question. And you've talked about Renew Life Center and some of these centers that are similar to what you do. And like we said, it's often assumed that there's help available, but we're not really sure where that help comes from for these women. And as we talked about, there's really not much past a year or so. And Nick asked a question similar to this, but I want to get a little more specific. So what specifically does Renew Life Center do, and other pregnancy crisis centers do, that it's not just giving them resources, but actually like trains them and trains their child. So what do you guys do? And what's that model that you want others to follow and emulate?
Okay, so pregnancy centers, in addition to, what we know they normally do with the pregnancy, they offer parenting classes throughout the whole year. And that they're excellent classes, generally speaking, the ones I've seen. So they offer parenting classes. So, oftentimes what we have to do is parent parents, because these are parents that, that didn't have much parenting support themselves. Right. So the pregnancy center's parenting classes, they offer lay counseling for a woman to be able to come in and, get some counseling and support. They offer relationship support, something new that pregnancy centers, some of them do. It's called Birth of a Family. So they provide, it's like a Bible study based relationship building, family building, groups that, a lot of times these single moms may have a boyfriend, like the baby's father's in the picture, but they're not married, right? So Birth of the Family kind of leads this young, tender couple into making a decision for marriage, which would be ideal for baby, for everybody, right? That talk about the ultimate win-win, right? So not only lead people to the Lord, but lead them to a marriage, a committed relationship. So those are wonderful things that I think the Pregnancy Center offers. Not all of them, but some of them do. The one I'm connected to offers that. What Renew Life Center does that is really unique is that it addresses the root causes of poverty. That is different than just addressing poverty, because ministries like food pantries and shelters and all those things, they alleviate poverty. They don't address the root cause to eliminate it. And what Renew Life Center does different is that we address the root cause, because if you don't address the root cause, you'll be constantly serving and providing resource to the good old saying, do you want to give them fish or do you want to teach them how to fish, right? So Renew Life Center teaches people how to fish. So we address the root causes of poverty. We offer work readiness workshops, career development programs, financial literacy programs, tutoring for when they decide to go to school. And then we're famous for our long-term support and long-term mentoring, because every time teaching is great, the education is great, but if you don't have the education coupled with the mentoring that helps you practice what you learned, it's just half. It's when you marry the two is when you get a great result. So, and I really think that one of the key things, and the model, we talked about the model that Renew Life Center does, that's our model. It's like, we talk about there's getting ahead resources and there's survival resources. We want to be a survival resource. I mean, a getting ahead resource. So we focus on developing people, right? So that's what we want to do. We are a development ministry. So it's really, it's unique. When you talk about people, go, oh yeah, we help people in poverty. We help them get jobs. Well, that's great. But did you address the root cause? Yeah, we give them food. That's wonderful. But did you address the root cause? And we're not all meant to do everything. So I always say, let them do what they do. They do it beautiful. And we do what we do, which is getting to the bottom of things, building that strong foundation so that everything that you build over it now has a stronger place to stand on and they can work from. So that's what makes us different than others organizations.
Yeah.
I do want to ask too, because you mentioned Lighthouse quite a bit in your book, and that's different than Renew. It's your partner, and it's not the church. So what is Lighthouse for the audience?
Lighthouse is a pregnancy resource center.
Okay.
And we actually share space. We built out a space together. So what I love about a partnership is that when the women transition from that pregnancy center to Renew, it's seamless.
Yeah, they don't have to find a new place. It's the same place.
They're right there. So when the pregnancy center says, hey, we would like you, we know you have a dream to go to school. We know you have a dream for a career, and our partner, Renew Life, can help you with that. I want to introduce you to Marisol. And she's like, oh, her? Yeah, I see her here all the time. So it's a natural. And I just wish every pregnancy center could do that. Because when you work that closely together, for them, it's a seamless transition. She's going from family to an extended family, kind of, so to speak. And it's so important when you're in poverty to do that, because people in poverty need relationships. People in poverty are so used to things being taken away from them that when you have something you can hold on to, and then they don't pass you on to a total stranger, right? They pass you on to, they transition you within the same space to something else. They still feel like, oh, you didn't just get rid of me. You know, we're still part of a family. It's very important. So that's what Lighthouse is. They're an exceptional pregnancy center that is out there, and they do all these, they do everything they can for the women that they serve, but they have to be, it's within their mission, right? Their mission is not to address poverty, right? So, and so they're smart enough though to find a partner that does. And that's the key. The key is not to do everything. Don't try to do everything. Do what you do best. Do what God called you to do, and find yourself a partner to do the other part.
That's great.
Yeah, I think the hope here is that we can clone this system that you have in Paterson, New Jersey, and all across the country,
and even make it better. If there's a way to make it better or whatever it is,
absolutely,
like, do that everywhere.
Yeah, because I mean, this is a big country. There's a lot of poverty pockets, and
but the church has resources to do some of this stuff, but sometimes we just don't know where to look. And I would venture to guess most churches don't know these things exist. I think we would want to think that they do, but like if you think about like pro-life ministries, it tends to just be like picketing at the local Planned Parenthood. Or sending volunteers there. And it's very rarely talking about, like, I did not know this existed until I read your book. That's I'm guessing that's the majority of our people who listen to this. It's just not known.
Yeah. And before we end the conversation on a practical note with that, because hang on to that for a second, that questioning he brought up was, as far as leading into my last question, just some practicality advice that you bring out in the end of your book for other parts of the country, how we can get the ball rolling in communities serving people this way. I do have one last question, based on good sake of time that we have. There's some beautiful stories of individuals you bring out in the book,
and heart-wrenching, but beautiful.
You'll tear you up. You're dealing with real people. This is obvious, but you bring out their names, you bring out their stories, and your personal impact of, you know,
the girl you took in. That
you know, you gave it started with just a hug. You're like, the Lord was telling you, like, give this girl a hug, and it started that in a lifelong relation. I'll let you just kind of take the floor and like pick which one, because there's a few different girls you talk about, and families, but if you want to just kind of
like making this concrete, like what does this look like, a story that you can tell, making this concrete for somebody who's listening.
Wow. Ooh, like you said, so many, so tough to pick up. But you know what? I'm gonna pick Kayan's story, because, or Carrie's story, I'm sorry. Because, you know, Carrie came to the pregnancy center, bunch of kids, mom with a man in the home, but not providing and not producing. And I love, this is a story where a team of people came together and really transformed her life and her children's life. So Carrie goes to the pregnancy center, which was Lighthouse. Lighthouse referred her to Renew. Renew started working with her. We put her through our poverty alleviation program, job readiness, all of that. We helped her fill out application. We sent her on her first job interview she's ever had in 8 years, right? She was nervous to that. She was chronically homeless. She was chronically unemployed. She goes, but we just saw her as a diamond in the rough. This girl, I'm like, this girl's got so much potential, right? So we send her off on her first interview. She gets the job just like that. We weren't surprised because we knew she had a lot to offer. And while she's working there, she meets other Christians that are working there. Fast forward, long story short, a Christian woman that was working with her noticed something wasn't right. Kayan was living in a domestic violence situation. And it took a Christian to notice it and to stop and say, hey, is everything okay in your house? Right? When she confessed that it wasn't, this woman was, the Christian co-worker was able to go to her church, who happened to be a part of a network called Family Promise, right? A network of churches that provide temporary housing for families in need. She was able to contact her church, where they had an emergency meeting to see how they can help Kayan out of this domestic situation. Within a couple of days, we had a response. We have a house for Kayan, a safe house for her to go to, you know, and And just like that, just because of all these transitions, that baton was passed from hand to hand, Kayanne was able to leave a domestically violent relationship, go into a safe home, transition her children out of all this, put them all in counseling. She attends church. She loves the Lord. She loves the Lord. And now she's working. She's left the original job we've got her after having multiple promotions. And now she's working at a state agency, making close to $50,000 a year. And none of that would have happened without those series of transitions that happen, without Christians stopping to notice, and not just noticing, just like the Samaritan, a lot of people noticed him as they were walking by, but someone noticed it and stopped. And then not just stopped and noticed it, but then took it to her church and said, "Hey, pastor, look at this. What can we do?" And they had the resources to do something about it. And I think that churches get overwhelmed. I'm not ragging on them. They get overwhelmed. But when you just, take it just one need at a time, it's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time, right? This is just one woman with one need. Can you help her? And I love that story, because I love how she goes from zero income for 8 years to nearly 50,000, a few years later, all with collaboration and help.
That's great.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Well, my last question is tying to the very end of your book. You list 5 practical suggestions. I know it's a little redundant, because I think you probably have explained these at this point in the conversation, but 5 practical suggestions to help parents faced with a crisis pregnancy and difficult choices they have to make afterward. So on pages 128 and 29. To end this conversation, can you please just briefly go over these, a high level view, call us to just the main point is to call us to serve our neighbors and our communities and replicate what you're talking about in other parts of the country. Just give some guidance.
Yeah, I think it's scary. I think when people, as I was writing the book, I was thinking, man, I hope I'm not scaring people. I want to excite them that there's a role for them out there. So I'm like, if any of this touched your heart, like, do not be afraid. Just take a baby step. Go figure out where's your local pregnancy center. Call them up. Say, hey, can I come for a visit? Can I get a tour? Bring some friends with you. Bring some of your church friends with you. Just find out what they're doing, what their needs are, what's going on. What gaps are you seeing? Where can we fill in these gaps? This is just exploring, just going. Don't feel like if you show up, you have to commit, and now you're tight. No, just go and explore and let God lead you, Find out, is there a ministry like Renew Life Center in that area? If there is, and you know what, we're all called to different things. Your heart may be drawn to that girl at the sidewalk making that choice. Your heart may be drawn to the pregnancy center with the parenting classes. You want to help women be better parents. Your heart may be drawn to helping her fulfill her dreams and her long-term needs and meeting goals, like getting a driver's license. There's plenty to do for everybody. Wherever God touches your heart, that's where you go, right? If your heart is for, man, I want to see these women, be able to provide for their children and keep them away from all those negative things like gangs and drugs and stuff like that, then find a ministry like Renew Life Center that's going to help her build stability. If there isn't one, start one. Start one. There's a model. There's who to call for the model, right? Figure out, do some exploring. This is what I want to encourage people. Explore what God has for you. Explore what role you play in the kingdom, because we all have one. God did not save us for us, right? He saved us so that we can reach others. So there's a purpose that we know Christ. And I suggest we find it, and your life will be fulfilled. I'm here talking to you guys, writing a book. I never dreamed this stuff. I never dreamed that this would be part of my life, but it all stemmed from one volunteer opportunity I said yes to 22 years ago.
That's
and
great.
I praise God for that. So yeah, go out there, investigate, I would say. Call your pregnancy center, find out what other ministries are around, and see what role you can play.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I want to end this conversation by turning attention to Renew, your model there. So if you can point people to where to go, what website to go to, where they can donate, and if they have questions, if like, hey, we don't live in New Jersey, we live in wherever else they live in the United States or in the world, how can they contact you to get some help to start something where they live?
Yeah, well, our website is renewlifecenterNJ.org. You can go there, fill out a contact form, and we will promptly call you back. Our phone number is on there as well. Thank God for technology like Zoom. I don't care if you're in Timbuktu, you and I can meet. I can share what we do. It's no longer, distance is no longer, the obstacle it used to be in the past. So, yeah, you could go to our website. You could learn about the book there, renewlifecenterNJ.org/book. You can donate there as well. My pastor always says ministry and money is a marriage, and we can't do ministry without the funding. And that's just equally as important as getting people out there physically to support these women. We also need those who can support the ministry financially so we could do what we do. Yeah, I hope you get the book. I hope you read it. I hope God speaks to you through it. And I hope that that you see what role you play in this relay race for life.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, I highly encourage people to read this, both if you're pro-life, and I think also if you're kind of hesitant around pro-life, around some of these issues, to see kind of a holistic perspective from the pro-life ministries, and also to contact Renew, to donate to Renew, and also to donate to your local pregnancy crisis centers or places that are like Renew. Well, I want to end it like that to build up some of these other ministries. And if you're listening, don't donate to us, donate to some of these things. But thank you, Marisol, so much for the work that you're doing at Renew, for the work that you're doing for pro-life ministry, for writing this book, for coming on our show and talking to us about this book as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was such a pleasure to be here.
Of course.